I've been pretty amazed at how much different and more flavorful All Trump's flour is compared to regular store-bought bread flour. I've been using King Arthur bread flour because from the handful of brands that I've tried, King Arthur has the best flavor. It's the most flavorful. But All Trump's was so much more flavorful, and it has different characteristics. And so I wanted to do a little bit of research to figure out why. And here's what I learned. First, and this is all very simple, by the way. I don't know why I didn't do this earlier. But first, let's take a look at the ingredients of the King Arthur bread flour. 2 ingredients: wheat flour and enzyme. So what exactly is the enzyme? I looked it up, and it is what they call a fungal alpha-amalyse, which is just it's like a commercially grown fungus that they put in because it helps to break down the starch into sugar, which aids in the fermentation process. Because what all the fermentation process is yeast. It takes sugar in the dough and converts it to basically alcohol and acid and carbon dioxide, the gas. The alcohol and the acids give the dough flavor, and the carbon dioxide is a gas that expands, so it makes the bubbles, makes it rise. Okay, that's all that the fermentation process is. That's all that yeast does. And this enzyme, the fungus that King Arthur puts in, just aids that process. And I guess this particular fungus is very common. They say, most people say, well, the government says there's no side effects. Some people say that they have allergic reactions to it. So anyways, that's what's in this King Arthur flour: wheat flour and this fungus that helps aid the fermentation process. Now take a look at the ingredients for All Trump's. The first 2 particularly, it's wheat flour and malted barley flour. And then everything after that's just enrichment, which is basically synthetic man-made vitamins. I did a whole video on that stuff. That's not relevant for this purpose. All we're talking about is the first 2, the substantive ingredients of wheat flour and malted barley flour. So I've seen this malted barley flour around. I don't even know what it is, or I didn't know what it was, so I looked it up. And it's just flour made from barley, and the malt indicates that the barley began to sprout before they make flour out of it. And so what they're doing here is literally mixing 2 types of flour: flour from wheat and flour from barley that has began to sprout. So why do they do this? There are 3 main benefits to adding malted barley flour. Number 1, malted barley flour adds protein, and that makes perfect sense. You go to the grocery store, you buy a bread flour, you're going to have protein content between 12 and 13%. However, All Trump's protein content is 14.2%. The extra protein in All Trump's is coming from this barley flour, okay? And the extra protein content makes the dough stretchier and stronger. If you remember, when the Italians came over to America and they found out that the American flour wasn't as stretchy and strong as the European flours, and so they had to add a protein. At the time it was lard, and then they started to change that over to olive oil. But that's all that the protein does in dough, is make it stretchier and stronger. And so that was interesting, because I found out with my All Trump's flour, you barely even need to add oil. It is already really stretchy and really strong. Oil made it a tiny bit more, but it's not even that necessary. However, with King Arthur flour, it's very necessary. The dough is not stretchy, it tears a lot easier, really easy, and you simply have to add protein, olive oil in my case, to King Arthur bread flour, but you don't have to with All Trump's. So that's the first benefit of malted barley flour. It adds protein to the flour. The second benefit is that the malted barley flour aids in the fermentation process, similar to the fungus. However, this one does it better because it also adds a brownness to the crust. Now, this was really interesting because if you watch my videos, you know that I did some experiments with diastatic malt powder, DMP, and I wasn't getting great results. It wasn't adding a whole lot, if anything, to my pizza crust. And I didn't know it at the time, but I didn't make this connection at the time, at least. DMP, all that is powder made from malted barley. Okay, so All Trump's is adding flour made from malted barley. DMP is simply like a more concentrated powder for malted barley. So it's doing the same thing. So the reason I didn't see much change in my All Trump's was because All Trump's already has a whole bunch of malted barley benefits, if you want to call them that. And so All Trump's already, fermented really, really nice. It resulted in a good sweet crust that turned golden brown in the oven. And so DMP just wasn't doing anything because I already had all those benefits built into it. So that's the second benefit. The third benefit of malted barley flour is that the flour retains moisture better. It creates more moist dough. When I read that, I was happy, because if you saw my last video, I just did an experiment where 61.5% hydration with All Trumps was roughly equivalent to a 68 to 69% hydration with King Arthur bread flour. And I never knew why. I didn't know why it made such a big difference, but now I know why. The malted barley flour creates a more hydrated dough. And that's also why I remember reading at least one comment. Somebody was saying that when they add DMP to their flour, it makes a big mushy mess. And that's basically what we're learning, is you just don't need the hydration with these malt products. So that's it. That's the three benefits of malted barley flour being added to your wheat flour. Higher protein content, which creates a stronger, stretchier dough. It aids in the fermentation process, converting the starch into sugar, so the yeast can do its thing with the sugar. It makes the dough sweeter and has a more brown crust. And then number three, it creates, I don't know if this is a benefit per se, but it's just something to be aware of, that the dough will be a lot more moist with less water. And that's important, because there's a reason that so many pizzerias in New York are using All Trumps, and this is why. This is just better for pizza. You want pizza dough to be stretchy and strong and have that nice color to it. So, and the good sweet taste. And that's why. So it's important to understand the hydration angle, because, if you're reading something or watching something online and your favorite pizzeria says they're doing a 62% hydration, well, you got to understand that if you're using bread flour, 62% is not good enough. You got to do like 68, 69%. So that's what I learned. Hopefully this helps some of you. Let me know what you think. Thanks.